Okay, so what I generally like to do when I'm modeling anything, I almost always start in the simplest way possible. So in this case, if I'm going to build something like Filigree, see if I can show you guys an image of that so you know what I'm talking about. All right, Filigree is this sort of elaborate kind of floral pattern, something you'd see in a lot of more kind of classical architecture. So best thing to do when building this sort of stuff is to start simple. So I'm going to go to channel box here and give this thing a few more subdivisions. One down the middle is probably okay, and then maybe a few height divisions. I'm going to also turn off the grid. Makes life a little bit easier. And while you're working, obviously, if you want to, I'll be using the Move tool a lot. So one thing you can do is just go into the Move tool settings. So I'll double click the Move tool and activate symmetry. So I'll say maybe object X, I think. Is that going to work? Yeah, perfect. So yeah, like I said, I often treat this stuff as kind of like sort of 2D design, really. So I'll go through, grab each point, start to slide things along. All right, just create basically like a simple piece of sort of foliage almost. Something like that, a little flared, a little sort of shapely. And everything is, as I've mentioned before, it's kind of all quad based, right? So everything's kind of four-sided. Good idea to keep the spacing equal as well. So go object mode, or face mode actually. Maybe I'll just stick to multi. There we go. So I could extrude this. Oops, just pull it upwards. So we get a shape like so. Now this probably looks fairly boring, right? It's not too exciting. So a lot of times this stuff will look far, far better if we hit 2 or 3 on the keyboard, right? So this is basically a smooth preview mode. If you render, I'm just going to show you this too. If you hit the render current frame option, you're going to see the low poly version of this. Let's scale this down a bit. So this low poly mode, depending on what render system you're using, this is Maya software. Hopefully you guys are getting familiar with Mental Ray or other render engines, but if we go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, right? So Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. This allows you to see all the different tools that may or may not be loaded in your system. And if I scroll down, there's a couple of different render tools or render engines. So one is called Turtle. This one I'm going to use maybe a bit later. So I'm going to just load this right now. So Turtle has some of its own materials, some of its own sort of settings. Turtle I'm going to use to generate a quick ambient occlusion render. And if we scroll down, there's probably also, I don't know if it's installed, Maya to Mental Ray. So you guys probably have this already loaded and installed. Now if you just want to load the tool once while you're working, you can just turn on loaded. If you want it to load every single time Maya launches, you can turn on auto load. It's up to you. I just wouldn't recommend having too many different render engines loading automatically at once because it can kind of slow down the launch of Maya. Plus, if you grab the wrong material from the wrong system, it could create some little conflicts and stuff, which might be a pain to deal with. So yeah, next up, if I go back to rendering, so I'll switch, I'll go to render settings, which is right here, this little kind of, what's it called, a movie slate, right? The little thing with the checkered line across the top and the little gear that brings up the render settings, which again, you guys are probably familiar with. And I can switch software here, so, switch render engines. So there's Mental Ray and Turtle. If I switch to Mental Ray just quickly and hit render, it should actually show the preview mesh, not the actual low-res mesh that I'm working with. If I go to Turtle, again, Turtle has much, much simpler options for the most part compared to Mental Ray, and hit render. All right, I'm still going to see the low res. So you might be wondering, well, how do you avoid seeing the low res at render time? I would simply go back to number 1 on my keyboard, hit the space bar, or go to the menu and go Mesh Smooth. I'm going to go to the settings for this. Division levels, set it to 2, which is what the preview resolution is when you hit 2 or 3 on your keyboard. It's basically previewing at subdivision 2, and you can apply that directly. So here you see what's really happening to the mesh, right? But if you're not rendering right away, I would save that for kind of a final step. So for me, I'm fine just working in preview res. Now, as we talked about before, when you're smoothing, your mesh will look fairly rounded, and that's because smoothing is subdividing or chopping up at each polygon 4 times, but it's also rounding out a lot of edges. So to get the look you want, it's kind of a tug of war. So you can either try to model everything by hand immediately and get a good look, or for me, I often go super, super low res, right? So my base model is fairly simple, and I'm going to use the appearance of this model with smoothing, or the preview smoothing on, to get the kind of edges and look that I want. So what I would do is go to face mode. I'm going to actually delete the bottom faces. Any faces that basically are not going to be visible in your scene. So if these things are going to be overlapping, they're going to be sitting, right? So these back faces or bottom faces are going to be sitting up against a column or a wall, right? Anything that's not going to be seen, you want to kind of delete and hide away. And this way you can basically lighten the load on your scene, right? Especially if these things are going to be kind of tiny and repeated a bunch of times. And once you do that, once you delete those faces, you notice that the edges along where those faces used to be, when I hit delete, they kind of crisp up, right? They kind of regain a sort of sharpness. So that's something else that's kind of useful to know about smoothing or subdivisions in any 3D software. Is that will tend to happen when you delete polys and have a smoothing activated. So we'll go to edge mode. And next up, I'm probably going to want to lift this edge up, let's say to create a little flare or shape. Okay. I'll grab a ring of edges next to this. I'm going to try connecting. And I may just pull this edge forward because it's adjusted, I guess, the kind of profile a bit. So I'm just going to play with it a little bit. I'm going to double click this edge, deselect the front one, and I can pull this down and in now, right? Now again, I'm affecting this profile here, so I may want to be careful about what I'm doing there. So I'm going to maybe deselect this edge as well and just pull this down and in. Okay, so it creates kind of a little bit of an effect there. And I may try, I'm going to try to bevel these edges first. So I'm going to see if I can just bevel this out and see what kind of look I get. And I'll take the fraction and spread that outwards. If I don't like that, I'm going to try something else. So I'll take these faces. So what I want to do is basically try to kind of create some extra curvature here. I'm going to go extrude face. Let's see. Ooh, getting some really bad results. Okay. So that's not terrible. I'm not crazy about it. Okay, so I'm going to do something else. I'll try going to edge mode. Yeah, and I'll chamfer this middle edge, or bevel. Okay, so I'm going to split it, and I'm going to add an extra segment. So if you notice by doing that, right, it creates a rather kind of crisp edge. So basically, every time you have an original edge that you need to add some sharpness or crispness to, you can try either beveling or inserting a loop or two next to that edge, which will create that kind of crisp look, right? You guys see that? So that's just by beveling the edge. Instead of just beveling it into two, here, I'll undo and redo so you guys can see that. So if I go back to edge mode here, double click and control backspace, you see how just removing that edge kind of goes back to it being round. So bevel edge, add a second segment, which actually really keeps the original edge, and then I can use a fraction and keep those three edges now close together. So if I want to do the same thing, I could try grabbing the edge loop that goes around this area and try beveling as well, right? And I'll do 2 segments, and you see how crisp that edge gets, right? Again, this all depends on style, shape, what sort of look you're after. So I may not like that edge. I'm going to try something else. I'll undo. I'll double click, grab all the edges around here. I'm going to go to, let's say, connect components. I'll double click the edges again. And I'm going to just scale them across X and Y, just a touch. Now it's warped the shape at the back, so worst case is I can just basically go, let's say I'll go to vertex mode here, just grab them all and sort of scale them back into alignment. So straighten things out a little bit there. So as you see, it sort of created this right kind of plumpness and thickness around that piece. Now I'll just switch to mental ray. Make it easy so I can kind of quickly preview what this looks like. I'm noticing a bit of a weird shading issue at the end here. I don't know if you guys can see that. So always a good idea, double check your mesh, make sure, I think these things are going inside out. And if I were to go back to number 1 on my keyboard, yeah, it looks like if you guys notice, edge mode, the edges are kind of overlapping and crisscrossing each other, which is creating that weird shading. So, you know, sometimes that sort of stuff happens. You just simply have to pull the vertices back over. Again, anytime you see any weird shading, it's usually an indication that something's gone a little goofy. I could have also prevented this by going into, where do we go? Preserve seam. So that's on the move tool, but if I went, I think I scaled this, right? So if I go back to symmetry settings, oh yeah, preserve seam is there. It should have avoided, any weird issue, but let me just see. Yeah, rotate. Should have avoided it, but for some reason it didn't. Anyway, so at least my mesh for now is fairly clean. If you look at the low res, it's actually not terrible either, right? Like, it's something that could be usable as is, especially if I were to go into, just grab all the faces and do something like I showed you guys before. Mesh display, maybe set normal angle. I'll try 30. Usually 30 right off the bat is not terrible. So you get some smoothing, right? And if you were to see this at a distance, it would kind of pick up, right, some shadows and highlights at roughly the appropriate angles. For me, I might want to be using something more like the smooth addition. So, a few things about this. If we duplicate these things, right, we can start to play around with this. We can also do things like go to the animation menu. I don't know if you guys have done this yet. Deform. We've got non-linear deformers. So just zoom in here. Non-linear deformers, and then you've got, I'll most likely want to just using bend, but I can also tear this menu off. So we've got bend, and I'll just grab the curvature setting. I don't know why it doesn't want to bend. There, finally. All right. So I'm just going to manually punch in some numbers here, maybe like 60 degrees. Depending on what axis this thing is facing, you might have to be careful about that. So here, let me just do this again. I'll move this one to the side this time. Go to bend. There we go, curvature. This thing is, yeah. It's basically bending along the wrong axis. So what I can do is grab the handle here, and I'll rotate this into position. You guys can see that. I'll change the angle because it's pretty extreme. So go to bend, change the curvature to maybe like 30 degrees. So you can really start to play with bend by grabbing the axis and changing it. Or if you click on the mesh, go to bend, you can set your angle here. So go 30. Right, so this is nice. You can start to drop copies in and make like flowers, petals, modify the shape. So it becomes a pretty useful tool. Also, if I rotate the other direction, let's say I'll go 90 degrees across this axis here. I'll just roughly line those up. Right, so I can bend in this direction, and I'll maybe go like -60, let's say. Go back to the object, -60. All right. The other interesting thing about this is that we can move this pivot. In this case, I'll go to move. Let me double click the move tool. I'll go move, let's say object. There we go. So if I move it this way, right? If I pull it along that axis, I can have the move start from there. Yeah, it does look like a tongue, eh? So I'll set, again, I'll have to grab the mesh here, set this to -30. And we can also play around with things like the low bounds and high bounds. So what this kind of does is sort of set a limit of where this stuff starts. And again, it might be easy to just kind of play around with the axis point itself. So what's great about this is as you kind of make these adjustments, I'll hit Control D. So rotate the other way. All right, these things start to build up really, really quickly. And yeah, let's rotate like so. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my preview mesh here. I'll grab the 3 pieces and combine them. And again, don't forget you can do things like scale and whatnot as well, right? So you can easily start modifying size and shape very quickly that way as well. So just go combine. Like I said, if I want to or need to, I'll go in and modify this stuff. So I'll go to let's make sure we're in modeling only here. Go to mesh, smooth. I'm going to open up the smoothing options. I'm going to try a subdivision of 1 and hit smooth. Now, if you want to see the poly count, let's go display, heads up display, and I'm going to just take a look at poly count. So 12,000 polys, that's quite a bit, right? There's a couple ways. If you needed to reduce or sort of simplify the mesh, I'm kind of used to doing this. I don't necessarily mind doing this. I could always go in, and it's maybe something I should have done before duplicating and bending these things, but oftentimes what I'll do is sort of skip every other edge, or I'll find an area, let's say like down here, where there's not a lot of change happening. So I'll grab this edge, shift double click this one, shift right click, and go to collapse edge, or merge edges to center. Actually, that's the bad one. There we go, collapse edge. Right, and it doesn't change the profile too much. So I'll go, yeah, edge mode. I usually do this in edge mode. So I'll click one edge, shift double click the next one. It grabs a whole ring of them. Shift right click collapse edge, and then I'll do collapse edge. So it sort of just simplifies the mesh that way. So you can do this, again, I usually kind of alternate, or I'll carefully examine areas. So where there's a lot of curvature, I'll try to avoid collapsing because those edges are kind of defining the the shape, right? The profile. So in this case, if I collapse those edges, not a terrible result. So I'm kind of using the best of smoothing, right? Low poly modeling, smoothing, and then managing the mesh afterwards by simplifying it a bit. Same thing down here. You know, this edge is probably okay. I might be able to take out the edge on either side. This is kind of weird here. Take that out. Again, this edge across this section here I find is not doing too much in terms of the profile, right? It's not really creating a shape. It's just sort of flat, right? And you can see that, I guess, along here. So I might try to just take this edge out and see what it does. Not great, but maybe the one below. Again, since this one may be more hidden, I can probably take that edge out. And if you look at the poly count, I've saved 200 polys so far. This will compound, so I'll probably be able to take out about half the mesh. So this, you know, it's a little bit more, I guess, technical. It requires a little bit more effort, but I'm a fan of this technique because, like I said, it kind of gives you the best of both, like low poly modeling. It quickly gives you nice fluid shapes, and it allows you to manage a scene fairly well. So I just took out another 150 on that piece, and again, I could probably just delete that piece and duplicate it, but oops. There we go. All right, and this would be very important, especially because let me delete the history as well. I'm noticing the history is still there, so go to modify, edit, delete by type and history. So that just clears out that bend modifier. So what's going to happen is as you start to duplicate these things, and maybe I should adjust my pivot point as well. So I'll slide that kind of back here. Right, so you can see how quickly these things start to multiply, right? Which is really nice. I mean, like I said, breaking things down into their simplest elements. So you could always import or bring in an image plane, trace out something like this, and you could do it with the spline as well and just make it a solid piece, and then extrude, right? So you can get a lot of detail. And if you break things down to their simplest elements, doing one or two pieces and then duplicating, warping the shape a bit, either with bend or maybe using a freeform deformer, a lattice actually is my terminology. This sort of stuff is great. Just keep in mind that if you're going to have a ton of these things, that this will impact the poly count, right? So I'm already at 2,600 polys just for this piece. And if you want up having a whole bunch of these, oops. Let's go world mode now, since I'm dealing with a copy of this group, right? So these things, like I said, you start from the base element and you start duplicating it. It really, the effect starts multiplying very rapidly. Let's say to finish this off, I'll create a sphere. And actually what I'll do is I'm going to grab these three pieces. I generally prefer to combine my mesh that I'm building, so I'll combine the mesh. Yeah, this sphere, let's say I'll do something simple like squash it down. Let's go to edge mode. Double click the edge. Actually, I'll double click the one just below the center line and delete that. Oops. Or convert that to, yeah, let's go right click and convert to faces. Delete that. I can double click the faces here and delete the rest. Should turn on my grid for a second too. So to make this simple, I'm going to go modify center pivot. Right, center pivot. And then I'm going to, let's go to object mode. Okay. World. Scale this thing down a bit. Now maybe add another more sort of simple architectural element. Nothing too crazy or fancy here, but okay. Let's go to top view, and then I'll just roughly center this stuff here. All right, so it just becomes this sort of nice, simple architectural feature. And I'll grab the flower first, grab the other two parts, and then again I'll go back to the modeling toolkit and combine, or you can go to your menu system. Again, I might just go modify center pivot. I think it's okay. If I'm not too happy with it, I can always go to the top view and just try to, yeah, I'm very crazy about this sort of stuff, so I'm gonna just center that like so. Pretty good. Oh man, one flower's a little off, but no biggie. Yeah, I mean it's symmetrical at least along the bottom, right? So that's not too bad. So I'll go edit, duplicate special, and then we'll just maybe duplicate it over by I don't know, let's say like 5 units or something. Woo! That's kind of cool, right? Well, this is actually interesting too. This is interesting too, right? It's an accident, but it does kind of show you that you can build things based on radial design, not just a sort of left to right, up and down kind of patterning. So that is pretty cool. Let's go back to edit, duplicate special. I'll just make sure our rotation is set to 0, and then apply. Also kind of cool, but need, again, this would be a little bit unnecessary. Like I would probably delete half that shape if I were to keep it that way. And actually they weren't in copy mode, so let me just delete that. I'll go instance. Again, it's sort of interesting, right? So if I went into face mode, yeah, let's face mode, double click and delete parts of these. So you could, in theory, right, delete some of that stuff and see what comes out of it. So that's kind of cool, right? So this is what I was saying earlier. The simplest shapes can actually result in some of the most complex patterns. And I always break things down in almost like a 2D point of view. I always look at a silhouette of some type, a front, a left, a side kind of silhouette, and I'll build a shape out from there and then add complexity as I go. But really, like, the stuff I did was quite simple overall, right? Okay, please come back. Undo. All right, there we go. So, got my object. So I obviously need to just go in and go to duplicate special and tweak the distancing. So maybe I'll go 15, right? It's not bad. So undo. So one thing Maya is missing is a live preview. I wish you could just crank these settings and see an update as you go, but I'm sure that's going to come in future versions. So that's pretty decent. All right, and if you were to add trim to that, maybe I'll just do a basic sort of trim. Go to edge mode. And we'll do extrude edges. All right, so as you add edges, or if I had a pattern too, I could do that as well. Maybe I'll do that instead. Because for me, I find this sort of stuff takes a lot longer than it should. So I'll go left view. A little bit sloppy there, but let's go to curves. Maybe I'll snap to, I'll snap to the grid for now, just so I can get kind of a nice, clean sort of shape. Go on an angle here, snap down like so. Create another little edge, maybe another little round shape of sorts. Okay, hit enter to finish that. So that doesn't look like much yet, but I'll go to perspective. Let's move this thing over just a touch. Actually, it's still on snap, so I'll turn off snap. Hit Control D, slide this cleanly along one axis, Shift select both, and then we'll go to, let's make sure I'm modeling here. I'll go to surface extrude. Woo. I always do this backwards because I'm still using the max terminology. It's actually loft is what I want. So when I loft that across, I'll probably also have to go convert this to mesh. So modify, convert polys to NURBS. Oh god, so ugly. Modify, convert NURBS to polys, sorry. Quads, I'll probably just try a count for now. Oops, it's generating triangles. You never want triangles. It's actually really ugly that way. Standard fit, general is actually not bad either, so I'm going to hit apply. And then I'm going to have to go in and let's just make sure I'm grabbing the right mesh here, because I think we've got the lofted surface, which is still kind of live and available. Yeah, and then we've got the NURBS to poly version. So I'll grab the NURBS to poly version, go to mesh, display, and reverse. Again, we've got this other version here, so yeah. So what we get is this kind of nice, right? Architectural trim, architectural feature. So anything that you see that is repeated, you can kind of break down into its simplest elements. Let's just delete by history here. There. Okay, so I've gotten rid of the ugly NURBS version. And if we need to see some of this edge work, actually, I think I may have limited my poly count too low when I created the NURBS to poly. So let me just go back and try that one more time. Sorry, guys. Grab this, delete it. Go back to the sweep version. Go back to modify. Convert to NURBS to poly. And we're going to go per span number of isoparms. So I'm going to just increase the V-axis and let's just see. Yeah, I've got curvature that's much more representative of my shape here. So I'm going to increase the V number to 12. A lot more curvy. Actually, I'll turn this down to 1. I'll crank the other one up to 8. There we go. That's the one I want. So you can sort of see I'm getting more kind of edges across that surface, which is nice. Okay, so grab this one. I'm going to go to mesh display, and then I'll reverse it. And I think this was offset for some reason, so I'm just going to pull this back and up right here. All right, so there's kind of like your little architectural feature and detail, yeah? It's pretty cool, I hope. And don't forget, too, you can also kind of recycle these shapes, right? So if I, let's say I'm going to line this back up like so. I could, in theory, let me go to, I guess, a top view. I'll just quickly create a Bezier curve. So we'll go and create something like this. I'm a big fan of these kind of like shapes because I find, yeah, especially in like classic architecture, they work so well. So go curves, open, close, and that closes off that shape. Go back to perspective. And I'll turn off the snap. Now this thing, sometimes this gets a little weird, right? If you're creating a shape off in the world, its pivot will want to go to the center of the world. So I'm going to just grab that little spline, go to modify, center pivot. And next up I can grab this piece. Let me just rotate this thing around 180 degrees. Just gonna eyeball it. So I'll grab the profile first, shift click the path that I had that I lofted across there, and I'll go to extrude. Again, I'll probably need to modify this, so I'm going to just slide this over. And again, what I would do, for you guys, I would suggest keeping the original shapes, just pushing them off somewhere, so you kind of know where they are. You can reuse them, recycle them. And I'll go modify, modify, convert to NURBS to polys. Now, if you want to as well, sometimes it's easier just to go by count. I can apply this and create a count, which isn't too bad. 200 polys isn't terrible in terms of poly count. Obviously, there's some goofy issues going on here, but I can clean that up. So I'll go to, go back to mesh display and reverse. Okay. And yeah, there's definitely a couple of edges that are going a little bit funny, so I might go in and just clean this up a bit. I'll just control backspace some of the weirder edges, and let's take out this one as well. Control backspace, yep.
Okay. Why not just delete?
Well, if you just hit backspace or delete, right, it actually leaves behind the vertices associated with that edge. So what you get are these 5, 6-sided polys, which are very, very messy. You should never do that. It's just going to create a disaster in your mesh. And guaranteed you guys are still going to do it, but you'll learn a painful lesson about avoiding that. So, oops. So what I might do to clean up the edges here, again, sometimes it's easy to forget that when you have mesh that's unnecessary, like all this stuff behind that I'm never going to see, I'm just going to delete. So I'm going to grab this stuff and delete it. There we go. Like so. So all this stuff that's kind of hidden, I can pretty much delete away. And I'm going to just straighten out. I'm not crazy about the shape there, so I'm going to just sort of straighten out this stuff. By the way, there's a simple command. If you want to expand the selection, so you see I'm kind of partially selecting, or let's say I grab this bottom edge, and I want to expand the selection, you can go Shift greater than or less than to shrink and grow a selection. That's a new one. Shift greater than will expand the selection. Cool? So Shift greater than or less than will expand and contract. So watch if I grab this polygon, Shift greater than, holding Control actually by accident. Shift greater than will expand the selection outwards. And if you go the opposite way, Shift less than, it'll shrink the selection back down. So that's very, very handy shortcut while modeling. So I'm going to just grab this edge and then go Shift expand, because I just want to grab that whole side, and I'm going to straighten it out, right? Kind of keeps it nice and clean. Now, as a result of that, I have additional edges that essentially become unnecessary. So I'm going to go edge, double-click this edge that's flowing along here, Control backspace, and that just cleans and simplifies things up. Same thing here. This is riding along a flat sort of surface, so I could Control backspace that out, grab this edge, Control backspace that out as well. Go to face mode, and I'll do the same thing roughly here. I'm going to... Okay, I'm noticing something, and I noticed it earlier, but I didn't mention anything. If you take a look, if I shift double click, or maybe I'll shift double click here. Okay, I'll tell you what I'm noticing. Shift double click. There's something happening here, right? I should be grabbing this whole kind of continuous series of edges, but it sort of stopped dead here. There's an issue. The issue is I've got a couple of edges sitting here. Again, it's not really helping me define anything, so I'm going to double click the one edge and remove it. So I'm controlling the poly count, I'm controlling the edge flow, keeping things nice and clean and simple. I'm I'm going to just straighten this edge out as well. Flatten that out. Now I could just repeat all this on the other side, but I'm probably just going to delete it and mirror this mesh. So, oops. So I'm just going to delete this part, and then I can double click this. Oh, come on. There we go. Double click everything there. Delete that. Again, I've got another fine edge. So sometimes, you know, you're working maybe a little fast, and you get this messiness. So it's always good to stay on top of it. And yeah, let's actually grab, I'll go into face mode. Face mode always seems to work better. So I'm going to double click the faces going along there and delete that fine edge across the middle. And I've got a little stray edge kicking around here too, so I'm going to delete that. Always nice to be as clean and orderly as possible. So I'll go to edge mode. And I think it looks like the selection's looping around here where I don't want it to. So I'm going to control deselect across the middle. You can always tell because you can see where the pivot is different, right? If I kept the selection, you can see it's sort of centered over this area. So I really want to deselect, and then I can scale this stuff nice and straight. Now, there's also some weird shading, so I'm just going to go to, let's make sure we're in poly mode here. So go object mode, and I'm going to go to mesh tools. Sorry, edit mesh. Oh, where is it? Mesh. Sorry, yeah, I'm going to go mesh display, and I'm going to go set normal angle. I'll just try 30 again by default. Pretty decent. And then I'm going to just place that in a second. Okay, so I'll go in. Mesh mirror. I'll go to mirror options, and I'll just apply this. Oops, going off in the wrong direction. I should probably also modify the pivot point because I think the pivot point's sitting way off somewhere in space. It's off the object. So again, this is sort of important. I'll go to a top view. Just hit F to frame this. I'll hit D to slide this thing over. There we go. Doesn't necessarily have to be exact, but it would help if it were resting along that edge. So what axis? I'm on the x-axis, and I can go object X, and I'll hit apply. Now, it's actually flipping. Yeah, so I'll go positive X this time, grab this mesh, and I'll hit apply. So what it's going to do is flip this over and then sort of weld the center line down together. So if we go back to perspective, right? We've kind of got our shape back. It's looking all right. One thing I probably would do, again, to manage the total poly count, this center line I don't really need anymore. It's a result of the mirroring. If it's not adding any detail, control backspace, take it out. Go to face mode. You don't have to be in face mode. You could be in object mode, but I tend to do things in face mode or vertex mode, any component mode. And then we'll control D. So this is just a way you can kind of add additional features, right? Embellish the mesh that you've already got. And you know, just work with basic shapes and silhouettes and profiles to expand out your mesh.